The Chernobyl Nuclear Disaster. In 1986, on a calm spring day, just 100 kilometers from Kiev, Reactor 4 in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant suffered a catastrophic steam explosion, resulting from a reactor meltdown. 2 men died immediately from the blast, with 28 plant workers and first responders succumbing to injuries from trauma or acute radiation syndrome in the months after. However, this 30-man figure is dwarfed when contrasted to the estimated 60,000 deaths that the disaster played a part when considering the minor effects across the globe. Not only did this devastating event carry a significant death toll, but it also had a major effect on the environment surrounding the plant. To answer the question of how this horrendous steam explosion in question came to fruition, one must first understand the fundamental science behind the energy production process known as nuclear power. Nuclear radiation is defined as the random emission of particles from the unstable nucleus of an atom. When the nucleus of an atom is so unstable, it could just take one neutron colliding with it to initiate a phenomenon known as nuclear fission. Therefore, by using a heavy enough molecule, such as uranium, as fuel, the molecule will randomly split. When this happens, it will release 3 neutrons and a large amount of binding energy. In a nuclear reactor, this energy is used to boil water to steam, which in turn spins a turbine to generate electricity. Now the reactor would be slow if we were to constantly wait for a molecule to randomly split. But thanks to the process of chain reactions, nuclear power plants have the potential to be incredibly efficient. Each of the 3 neutrons released by nuclear fission has the potential to initiate the fission of another heavy atom. Ergo, with critical mass of fuel, enough fuel to achieve a self-sustaining fission reaction, and control rods made of neutron-absorbing material to control the reaction, a large amount of electricity is efficiently produced from the system in a controlled manner. The reactor core is subject to extremely high temperatures. Therefore, heat transfer is a key aspect in the design of a reactor to avoid overheating and a meltdown. The most commonly used coolant in the nuclear industry is water. This is due to its high heat capacity for both cooling and heating, and its very large latent heat of vaporization. However, water does not come without its disadvantages. One of these is that water-cooled reactors must use a high-pressure primary circuit to force the water into a liquid state to maintain efficient heat transfer. The primary circuit is from the surface of the fuel rods to the coolant flow, and the secondary circuit is the water-steam circuit, in which water is converted into steam used to drive the turbine. Then it is used in the tertiary circuit, where it is condensed back into water. Using this basic understanding of what is going on inside the reactors, some guesses may be made that the control rods may be malfunctioned and failed to absorb neutrons, resulting in an uncontrollable chain reaction. Or maybe the wrong fuel was used, or potentially the reactor was not designed or manufactured for the operating pressure. However, the story tells as such. On the 25th of April, engineers working on the Reactor 4 of the Soviet RBMK variety began the preparations for a test to find out if the reactor turbines would sustain the required power output in the event of a power outage. These preparations induced the reactor into an extremely unstable condition. So when, on the 26th of April, the operator inserted the poorly designed graphite-tipped control rod, the core surged in power. Consequently, the fuel became much hotter than usual, so when the coolant interacted, the fuel fragmented and a massive amount of steam started to generate. This caused a huge increase in pressure, which in turn dislodged the 1,000-ton cover plate. The fuel channels were ruptured, and with a gap in the cover, coolant water dumped into the reactor, quickly evolving into steam by the high temperatures and therefore causing an explosion, releasing toxic radioactive waste into the atmosphere. This was followed by a second explosion, spewing out hot graphite and fuel fragments, which was likely a hydrogen explosion caused by zirconium steam reactions. However, this is disputed among experts. The explosions led to fires, which was the main release of radioactivity, and a total of about 14 times 10 to the 18 becquerels of radioactivity was released, with 1 becquerel being 1 event of radiation disintegration per second. 134 station staff and firemen were diagnosed with ARS from the freedom of radioactive products. Of these, 30 died within days to months, and another 14 were suspected to have died to radiation-induced cancer within the next 10 years. The airborne radioactive mass released from the explosion proceeded to cover the area around Chernobyl, first resulting in an exclusion zone of 10 kilometers, which quickly increased to 30 kilometers. However, most of Western Europe and parts of the USSR, particularly Belarus, was covered with 70% of the contaminated mass. This corrupted drinking water, crops, and air, and emanated in a significant population of the affected countries being overexposed to radiation, leading to a massively increased risk of cancer and other health problems. Charities have investigated the ongoing trauma of the crisis, and British paediatrician Dr. Rachel Furley has discovered that in severe cases, children can be born with missing limbs, and in one case, a baby was born with 2 heads.
Massive damage was caused to the local environment too. The forest inside the exclusion zone, also known as the Red Forest, as so many trees turned red and brown after absorbing extreme amount of radiation. But aside from this, there was a significant discovery in the world of extremophiles from the disaster. During studies on the site in 1991, a team of scientists identified 3 species of fungi to be living in the reactor. Those malaria-rich fungi were found feeding on the much higher than normal radiation level, which is more than 500 times the normal, where the conclusion was that these extremophiles were the first to be found gaining biomass and accumulating acetate due to the radiation. On the International Nuclear Event Scale, it shares the maximum score of 7, only with the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan in 2011. Coupled with the fact that it could have been more prevented, make it no surprise that the Chernobyl nuclear disaster is regarded as the worst nuclear disaster in history. The Soviet government deceived and lied about the disaster. Officials and political party members in the area were safely transported to Moscow almost immediately. However, for those living in the satellite city of Chernobyl built for the plants and the adjacent city of Pripyat, families were told to carry on as normal, with children playing outside, windows being left open, and people on the street all being exposed to a considerable level of radiation. It took 36 hours for people to evacuate, where some were already showing symptoms of the ARS, and even the emergency firefighters were not even told it was a radioactive issue they were dealing with. Now, the area will not be habitable for around 24,000 years. Surprisingly, the site did not close after the disaster. Instead, the other reactors at the plant remained operational until 2000, as the Soviet Union could not afford to close them down. But as of 2020, the site remains in the process of decommissioning. Obviously, after the incident, reactor 4 could not just remain open to the environment, so initially a large concrete sarcophagus was installed over the reactor building to greatly reduce the amount of radiation being emitted to the atmosphere. Up to 600,000 people, known as liquidators, took part in the cleanup, some being ordered to shovel highly radioactive graphite working in shifts of 90 seconds each to reduce exposure. To clean the roof of the reactor, officials first attempted to use robots. However, those could not stand the radiation. Humans were used instead, where 40 seconds they were dosed with more radiation you should receive in your entire life. This sarcophagus was eventually replaced in 2008 with a new safe confinement, a steel polycarbonate structure to better seal off the area, and over the years cleanup work has been carried out, such as removing excess fuel from the inside Reactor 4 and removing uncontaminated equipment from Reactor 1 and 3, with decommissioning starting in 2015. From this catastrophe, many of other European countries operating with the Soviet RBMK reactor make the decision to either completely shut them down or adapt them as RBMK was notoriously badly designed. Also, the International Atomic Energy Agency responded by expanding, revising safety standards and telling any member state to swiftly report any incident with potential to cross-border effects. In time, as energy production methods are optimized and improved, nuclear energy will become more and more safe. But as long as it's used, there will be the risk of another catastrophic event. The ejected matter has half-life of between 30 to 24,000 years, means an environmental threat for centuries to come, and humans will still feel the impact of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Thank you for listening.